Hello and welcome to what I know is going to be an excellent session as part of this Reimagining Real Estate Global Summit. I'm Emily Wright, Tech Editor and Head of Special Projects at the States Gazette. In case the accent doesn't give it away, I am dialing in from London. It's a lovely sunny evening. And today I'm joined by Dean Hopkins, Chief Operations Officer of Oxford Properties. And how are you doing today, Dean?
I'm excellent. It's very warm here, but enjoying a lovely summer day.
Perfect. Now, you've only been at Oxford Properties and indeed in real estate more broadly for just under a year. With a consultancy and tech background, you've been brought on board tasked with bringing that experience and expertise in tech and applying it to the real estate business, which you were doing. And then the world changed, and you're still doing it, but under slightly different circumstances. So before we get into the details of, what you've brought to the role and how you want to move it forward, it would be remiss of me not to ask, how you are, how things are going, how it's going in lockdown, both personally and for the business as well.
Yeah, listen, we're all happy and healthy at my house. I have 3 not so young children, so 19, 20, and 21. And everybody's doing great. They all have their plus ones at home with us. So it's quite a busy house, wow. 8 of us, 2 dogs and a rabbit, which makes for interesting times, but much less so than some of my colleagues who have quite young children. So we're not as nearly disrupted by kids coming in and out, which is, I think, shown a real humanity in all the meetings I've been in. So no, we're doing great. Everybody's happy and healthy. It has created a net new job for me though, in professionally, as I inherited the work to essentially create our protocols and our Creating Safer Spaces playbook for opening and closing what is about 400 buildings around the world. So that was something new for a guy not from a real estate background to learn, but it was I relished it. It was a great way to learn the business and meet all the people in our world. So, and our business is doing great actually. One or two categories that we're in are probably more impacted by COVID than others, but the rest of our business has been strong throughout, as has our teams doing the work on transformation, which we'll talk a little bit about later. We've maintained stride and kept our pace up and kept the rate of transformation going, which is a testament to how great the technology is to allow us to actually continue to work at pace while not actually being in our normal workplace. So we're pretty excited about that.
All sounds very exciting. And I'm not going to let you get off too easily, though, on that thing that you mentioned about operations being part of your job title now and having to oversee and facilitate that amazingly complicated and complex maneuver from face-to-face business to a remote business. And as you say, so new to real estate as well and all those buildings. So before we get into sort of the nitty-gritty of what we want to talk about, what was that like? How did you handle that?
It was really intense. It brought me back to my days early in my career where I joined a company called McKinsey & Company, which is a very famous management consulting outfit. And they throw you off the deep end into new industries. And you have to learn them very, very rapidly and then become thoughtful about advising the clients on what you see. And so I realized here I was in real estate, and yet I had to learn all of the best practices and in a time when things were moving very rapidly and there was really nothing nailed down. So I just went back to my old sort of tried and trusted and true skills as a consultant to sort of learn an industry. And I had a fantastic team around me that was advising me. And so we collectively just worked really hard to put what we thought was a tremendous product out there, consulted with over 50 of our leaders around the world, industry people, by the way, which was terrific. The whole industry collaborated incredibly together to showcase what they were doing, what they were finding worked, what they didn't find work. And in about 6 weeks, we went from not knowing anything about this to having a very detailed 70-page protocol that we could essentially mobilize across 19 cities, 400 assets in every sector. And we were very, very proud of that. It then was rolled out over the next month. And we've gotten some tremendous accolades for taking such a leadership role in putting something quite comprehensive together. But I think, we couldn't take entire credit for it. It was really the collaboration of a huge number of people in a huge amount of time to get it done. And I just really helped coordinate and knit it together to make sure that it made sense. So it was a real opportunity for me to meet those people, meet those experts, learn about the business that I was helping to lead, and nail down some protocols that were largely net new for the entire industry around the world, which was a chance to really get in on the ground floor of it.
Yeah. Well, extraordinary times and extraordinary tasks, and I'm sure you've obviously done it expertly. So let's talk a little bit about you and how you've approached this what is still a very new role and a new sector. So you've come in with a very extensive background as a tech entrepreneur. And I'm really interested to get a sense as to, how that stood you in good stead to come in and, tackle an industry like real estate head on. And I know that Oxford Properties was really keen to get you on board for that reason, among others, that fresh look and that tech expertise. And also just to sort of begin to get a sense as to how you've approached the industry in terms of rolling out that new approach to technology and digital transformation. So first of all, coming in with that fresh pair of eyes, what were your first impressions of real estate? And then how have you worked with it since?
Yeah, so it was very interesting coming from an industry that it moves very rapidly, that's always sort of trying new things out, and coming into real estate and realizing that many of the things that I took for granted or that we saw in sort of industries that had embraced technology a little bit more rapidly hadn't yet permeated into real estate. And so they were starting to, but they hadn't yet really reached full stride. And so what I realized is that I could bring a lot of that experience, having implemented technology and transformed quite complicated sectors, and I could bring that experience to a sector that was just at the very early stages of embracing the technology. There was a tremendous amount of curiosity about technology, which was great, because I wasn't coming into an environment where people were saying, we don't need technology. Quite the opposite. People were very much curious, but not sure where to begin, not sure where to start, not sure how to get going. And because I was joking earlier with one of my colleagues, because real estate builds buildings, which means they plan things very diligently down to the last bolt before they sort of start designing construction project, technology works the exact opposite way, right? We build not necessarily knowing entirely what it's going to end up to look like in very agile, short sprints. And that was a completely new concept in real estate. So we've had to change hearts and minds in terms of how people think, how they work, the pace at which they work, the terminology that they use. So it wasn't as much about technology, actually, in the end. It was about how we work together, how we collaborate, how we look at problems in new ways. And so that I'd been doing for a very long time. And I thought, here I can really help. I can really bring a new perspective at pace. Because the other thing that I noticed is that the real estate industry was used to working at a certain cadence. And yet the industry was starting to change, or the expectations of customers, the expectations of tenants and competitors were starting to move at a much different pace. And so we needed to change the pace at which we looked at concepts, implemented them, ideated, tried new things. And that became one of the most significant things I worked on, which is how do we ultimately move quicker, move at more bandwidth, move trying new things, accepting risk of, hey, listen, this might not work, but I'm going to learn a lot and I'm going to apply it to the next iteration. That was all kind of generally the first year of my operation has been all about changing the method, the way we think. And that's been tremendously helpful to the organization, because I think we can now take on a lot more than we would have a year ago.
And, a year is actually quite a short space of time to sort of change that mindset for an industry. And I know that, Oxford Properties, like lots of other companies, actually are really forward thinking and really want to embrace that change, which is why obviously they brought you in. But how did you find the reaction to what you were suggesting? And when you were pushing for that change of pace, how, I suppose, how quickly did everybody get on board with the need to be quicker?
Well, the great news is, and I'd done a little bit of due diligence before I joined the organization, Michael Turner, our president, he had spent the better part of about 15 months before I joined advocating for the strategy that we have, which one of the elements of the strategy we have is called Oxford 4.0. And Oxford 4.0 is a concept of us aspiring for the next iteration of our being. And he's a very kind of tech forward leader, and had been imagining and inserting into the vocabulary of people for about 15 months that we were reinventing ourselves and inspired it with technology. But he didn't have anything concrete below that to sort of talk about exactly what that would look like. Insert me into the equation, and I took the Oxford 4.0 and really elaborated it and said, okay, here's what that looks like. Here's how we are going to make Oxford 4.0 a reality. And then people still, I think, look at that a little bit with, well, all right, let me see, I'll wait and see how it manifests. So then I realized what we needed to do is have some proof points. So we started some projects which I think could have very short-term impact that would affect a lot of people and would showcase what 4.0 could look like. And we started those projects in earnest almost the first day I started, and very, very quickly started seeing impact across a wide number of people. And the light bulb started to go off. Oh, this is what it means. Not only that the output of the project was there, but that the way that we delivered the project, using the new methods, using the new ways of working, using the better engagement model around the world. So people started to sense that this was not only different output, but a different way of delivering the output. And that started to then take on the character of 4.0, which we now talk about quite extensively through the organization.
And can we sort of delve into some of the kind of key elements of quant real estate, which I know is something that I'm so excited. I really want to do it. Yeah, it's brilliant. I know that has been very much the backbone, well, if not, the entire skeleton of your approach to what you're doing at Oxford Properties. And, everything from, farming to hunting through to, how you view the real estate value chain and how you're viewing it maybe through a slightly different lens to the sector is used to. That would be great.
Indeed. Yeah. So one of the things that I, even just to educate myself about real estate, is I wanted to understand how we made money. Because it's really important not just to do technology for technology's sake or to transform things just to, without a lens. And so I constructed a very simple value chain, which said, hey, listen, we buy things, we build them, we improve them, we operate them, and then we sell them. And somewhere along the line, we hopefully make more money than what we bought them for or built them for. And I tried to understand how technology was changing every element of that value chain. And what I came away with was, one of the most important things that's happening is we're moving from a very opaque analog model where no one really shares with each other, and there is a kind of general lack of clear data that allows you to make informed decisions proactively. There's a lot of reactive data. So for example, if you're buying an asset, you'll get sent a lot of data for you to analyze and build your underwriting model, but no one can, it's very difficult to do that proactively without a deal on the table. And I realized that most people in real estate, at least on the investment and asset management side, spend a lot of their lives chasing data, looking for and validating and modeling data. And I said, listen, we've got better use for human beings who are very creative and very collaborative. Why don't we take all of that data element and all that analytic work and the predictive work and actually lean on technology to do it, because it's actually more capable to do it and can do it more proactively. And I started realizing what we were talking about there was actually creating more of a Moneyball style of doing real estate, where you start to look for very interesting attributes, characteristics to build your team or your portfolio, much the way the Oakland A's did, by being a lot more thoughtful about data and how you go from a system of record to a system of predictions, which is going from farming to hunting. And using data and analytics and AI and machine learning, which we're just on the very early forefront of doing in real estate, but other industries have really embraced, I think really signals the entrance to this notion of quant real estate, where we are going to be much more thoughtful about how we look for opportunities, be they acquisition opportunities, be they asset management opportunities, where we're going to have collectively across the world very proprietary models distinct to each organization. They're going to talk about how we run things, and those are going to tell us where we've got unrealized value. And that, when you start to go backwards from that, you realize there's a lot of sources of data we haven't tapped yet. For example, it's been very difficult to tap the data from buildings, right? Just getting the building to talk to you and tell you everything that's going on in the building, from the HVAC system to the elevators to what the people in the building are doing. It's very, very difficult to do that over the existing buildings because the tech wasn't really designed specifically to do that. Now, smarter, more modern buildings can, but anybody who has a large portfolio, we don't have a lot of modern buildings. So we got a real uneven surface for getting that data out of the buildings. And that's just one of the sources of data which we have yet to tap. There's a lot of other industry data. Pulling all that together, being thoughtful about how you model it and how you look for opportunities is really where we're seeing a huge volume of work across our entire landscape. And what's interesting about it is the skill set. So now we're starting to realize it's not just technology in the back office. Technology is starting to creep into the front office, where people, to do their jobs, to be an underwriter or an asset manager, you have to actually be pretty good at data analytics, data science, and visualization, because you're really looking for the signal, the interesting idea that's sitting somewhere in the data and you know it's there. And we're giving people the tools and training to become that thought leader now in their world, bringing their domain expertise and giving them the data to make those decisions, which I think is very interesting and completely a change from what had been a very reactive business in the past.
Absolutely. And I know that you've done a lot of work around, now it's not, I know that you don't necessarily use the terminology digital twin, but I'm interested to find out how you see that, because
Sure.
that's something that, is playing into so much of what the real estate sector is doing at the moment. There's still a bit of confusion, I think, around how it works and, how it can be used. And I know that you have a very interesting take on it.
Sure, it's actually quite related to the thing I just talked about, which is when I started learning about digital twins, which is about almost 4 weeks on the job, I went out and spent some time with Microsoft to learn about the work that they're doing in digital twins. And I realized, this is really interesting. This is a way to take a whole bunch of very different sets of data from a building and actually allow them to coalesce in a single way. So you can actually see the building represented from all the different kinds of data. And what I realized was it had been extensively used in development because of the visualization and 3D BIM models that people are building, but it hadn't really been applied to the brownfield, to the existing buildings, and how you take an existing building and represent it in a way that showcases all of the things that are going on in that building through an interface that allows you to look at it as though it's a building. So call it a virtual representation of the building, because I like to refer to it as building virtualization, not digital twins, because there's so much confusion around what that is. And the other piece I realized that had started to creep in was the notion of command and control. So instead of it just being a fancy dashboard that shows your building and everything that's going on, what's way more interesting is what you do with that data. So how the data flows into the building and says, this sensor at this place is emitting an error. Well, then you have to have the control signal to be able to go back to the building and say, do something about that signal. There's too many people in that washroom, put a red light on. This site hasn't been cleaned in a day, send a cleaning crew in. So it's the round trip that becomes very interesting. And it's the round trip across different sensors. So the elevator sensor says something, and then you send something to the building engineer who isn't necessarily looking at that. So, the twin becomes the integrator, the ability to look at the building and do very intelligent things with all of the signals that come from it. And what's crazy is, because this is such an early concept in buildings, is that the tech stack, the pieces of technology that make this thing work, are not yet mature. So you kind of have to work a little bit harder than you should have to get all the pieces to come together. And I think the industry, Microsoft and others, are starting to work on that, but it's still early days relative to groups like, airplane engineering, jet engineers in GE. They've been doing this for 10 years and they've got everything very tightly together. We're not there yet as an industry, but I have huge confidence, because of the kind of value I'm seeing, that it's very likely to take some shape. And I'm working very hard with the leading players in the industry to help them see the value and pull all the pieces together in a reasonable way that makes some sense.
And it's really interesting to talk to you about what you're doing in your role at Oxford Properties. And what I'm interested in is, obviously, a lot of what you're talking about has as you'd expect, has such a broad application across the entire sector. So I'm quite interested to kind of get your views on how you've seen the rest of the industry plug in the space of time that you've been working in this current role. Obviously, you've been very focused on that role and the company you're in, but how have you seen the rest of the industry kind of, as I say, plug into this? And are you noticing that there is movement elsewhere as well to adopt these processes?
Absolutely. I've been privileged to be welcomed into a number of groups that I think are representing the kind of best thinking, be it groups in New York. There's a group called the Real Estate Owners Council that represents about $1 trillion worth of real estate, and in various vendor communities that pull together large cross sections of different groups. I'm on the board of advisors at Procore, and that represents a large group of the design and development community. So and on and on. And this allows us to really have open and quite collegial conversations. COVID has really helped us sort of share. And so there's a willingness to share insight, collaborate on projects. So we're doing a lot of work with Brookfield on a number of technology projects where we see eye to eye and sharing insights. Because I think collectively we believe that if we can coalesce around a certain subset of technologies, it'll just make life easier for all of us. And then the competitiveness comes in how you use the technology, not whether you have it or don't. Mm-hmm. And so, we all seem to have a very clear sense of that. And there's been a huge amount of collaboration. There hasn't been a real estate company that I haven't been able to pick up the phone and talk to my counterpart, talk to an innovation person, talk to head of technology, and see what they're doing, where we share what we're doing and they're sharing what they're doing. And together we come away with something that benefits both of us. And that's unusual in an industry. And I think quite a strength of the industry, frankly. I think it will help us navigate the choppy waters that will inevitably come, because we'll all be kind of sharing insights and helping avoid those dark alleys, which you wouldn't go down if you had a colleague telling you, we tried that, it didn't work. I recommend you try this. And so we're actively pursuing all those conversations.
That's really interesting. And I want to come on in a minute to sort of have a chat about the current situation we're in and the pandemic and COVID-19 and what that's meant for everything that you've been working on in the wider industry. But one thing that you mentioned there that's really interesting is around collaboration, which is obviously, so important and has been something that lots of people have, I think, or certainly here in the UK anyway. I live under the Heathrow flight path, by the way. I don't know if you can hear the planes.
Actually, we can. It's great.
They've been silent for goodness knows how long, and today, for some reason, they're back.
They all decided today was the day.
They decided today was the day. But that idea of collaboration, as I say, is such an interesting one. And I don't know whether it's just here in the UK, but there has been a bit of friction when it comes to collaboration. So I want to know, do you think that that's real estate, and real estate is actually really improving in terms of collaboration? Or is it you? Is it, that you alone?
I think, listen, I cannot take credit for this, because I think many of these institutions existed before me. I just threw myself headlong into them because they represented so much potential for me. So because I was learning my role, I didn't know anything about real estate coming in. I was telling you the story. I think that I was sitting in my first few management meetings, Googling terminology as I was in, like, what's NOI? I have no idea, right? So I had to learn this whole thing very rapidly. And so I threw myself into these institutions that I thought were an immense opportunity to learn, compare notes, make sure I wasn't going down any blind alleys, and in giving, contributing things that I'd seen in my own path before the industry. And so that very, very rapidly made me some great connections and some great network, which then I was able to transit to other groups. But I see many people doing the same thing. Many of my colleagues have been part of that process and got it started, frankly, and I'm just there to help it continue. And I do think it's uneven around the world, but I've spent a bunch of time in Europe now with my colleagues in Paris and in Germany and in the UK, and really inviting them into the process, and they've been incredibly helpful in sharing their own insights and sharing. I think actually there's some very interesting innovations coming out of Europe right now that we're not seeing elsewhere, and I'm quite excited about importing them into other markets. So no, I think we're still early days. There's still a lot of momentum to build, but my sense is this is a global movement, and we're seeing innovations come from everywhere now, not just Silicon Valley. And so in my mind, it means tapping into all those places that innovation could occur. And there's real estate everywhere, which is great, which means we can use the real estate apparatus to find out and import those really interesting ideas to make our industry better.
You said something there that was, you nearly went into it, and I'm going to ask very quickly, put you on the spot. You said there are some great innovations coming out of Europe you're not seeing anywhere else.
Sure.
As a journalist, I can't possibly let that one go. So what are they?
Well, I'll do so for example, I was at a meeting at our colleagues at Allianz in France, and just sharing what we're doing and what they're doing. And we were talking about the fact that innovators don't often understand the real pain points that happen in commercial real estate. They're often projecting what they think are issues, and we've got this long set of issues that no one seems to be tackling. And we got around to talking about elevators, which I thought was a really interesting thing, that elevators are such a pain point for everybody. And I realized, wow, there's a lot of gold in everybody has a lot of elevators across asset classes. They're difficult to maintain. They're expensive. They're notorious to break. They cause a terrible customer experience if they're down. Sebastian said to me, well, we found this great company that has reinvented the whole way in which elevator maintenance is done. They've got a gig economy, they've got IoT sensors, they've got a whole piece of software, and they've turned elevator maintenance into a service. And I'm like, oh, that is a dream come true. Let's take a look. So, it turns out that there is a great company out of Paris, a bunch of fantastic entrepreneurs, a company called We Maintain, that has completely disrupted, or is in the process of disrupting, what is an oligopoly in the elevator business. And I just love the fact that they went super deep in a very narrow problem space, that where they really understood the problem and they came out with a solution that's quite compelling. As a former entrepreneur myself, that's what makes successful entrepreneurs, people that go very deep in a very specific problem area that is acknowledged by the industry as a problem. And so We Maintain out of Paris, go look them up. They're fantastic. And they're just one example of what I'm finding out there in the world of people doing interesting things.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We have a few minutes left, and what I wanted to do is have a chat to you about this extraordinary situation that we all find ourselves in. This is the reason that we're having this conversation the way we're having it, and it is the reason that everybody is working from where they're working. You've got quite, in some ways, unique view of what's sort of happening, in that you've joined the industry, had to learn an awful lot, and then this has happened. So what do you think the short and long-term impact of this is going to be, based on your experience of the industry so far and the direction things were going, and indeed the direction you were taking them in? Sure. Everything's kind of reset slightly.
Yeah, actually, I think there's an immense amount of, call it, silver lining to this. And I've been sort of really trying to get to the bottom of what that silver lining is. And first of all, I think many of the transitional things that are happening were already happening. They're just now massively accelerated by this. So whether it's the reimagining of the role of the workplace and the office category, I think the death of office is greatly exaggerated. I think the move towards reimagining the workplace and its value in how it serves the people that go there was already underway. This has just caused us to rethink it at a much quicker pace, which I'm in favor of. And I think what we're seeing is tremendously healthy moves to think about the office as a source of, competitive advantage in the war for talent, which is what I think the best people who think about the office are transitioning to. And then on the digital front, because we had to move very quickly to operating digitally, this had two interesting silver linings. One is people really appreciate the ability to work digitally, to work seamlessly, frictionlessly, with a lot of self-service, not having to wait a huge amount of time for things to occur. So it's increased the, interest in all of the technology projects we have queued up. They want them now faster, where I think change management would have been a lot slower. We've now accelerated change management dramatically. And the third element, or the second piece of that one, is global. We're a global organization, and it's always been tricky to think globally and act locally. But by leveling the playing field using the technology like the one we're using right now, it means that any of my colleagues around the world, I can collaborate with them frictionlessly globally, which means we can do a lot more global thinking, tapping into global talent pools, global perspectives, increasing that diversity of thought, which is tremendously important in making sure we end up in the right place.
Wow, thank you very much. There's a lot there, and I think it's not, as I said previously to people, it's not the route to success that anybody would have wished for, but there are certainly always silver linings to be found, and opportunity does stem from adversity. As I say, not the route anybody would have wished for.
No.
But
they rarely are, though.
We are where we are, and it is encouraging to hear that good is stemming from what has been an extraordinary and very difficult situation. And what a time for you to have taken on this role and gone from Googling terms in meetings to sort of temporarily shutting down 400 offices and changing the way everything was operating. And I mean, it must, just to finish off, I mean, it must feel like it's been quite the year.
Oh, it feels like a century. It doesn't feel like a year. But I've had a huge amount of support, a huge amount of help. A lot of people have been patient with me and helped me, learn what I've learned and, modify my thinking so that it's in the right context for real estate. I've still got a tremendous amount to learn. There's no way I can get to mastery of this industry in such a short period of time. But my door is always open for people that want to share and learn about my experience outside the industry and help them with the perspectives that I've learned. And I like to give more than I take. So, reach out if I can help in any way. I'm more than happy to do so.
Fantastic. And finally, that would have been a lovely place to end, but I always like to get one more question in. If you had one message to leave everybody with after this session, like one thing that they should take away with them, it doesn't even have to be about real estate, although I imagine it might be, but it can be about anything like technology, sort of adversity, whatever it might be. What would that be?
I would say the biggest single thing that I've learned in so many different ways over the last little while is listen. And you've got two ears and one mouth, and we often don't spend enough time listening. Truly listening. We listen to respond rather than listening. And I've noticed that in whether it's dealing with my Black or underrepresented community colleagues, or whether it's looking for solutions to problems inside our organization. Often the solutions are already there if you just listen, if you actually get out and listen. And so I would say the one thing that this has all taught me and that I think people should take away is if a guy can come into the industry from outside and spend a lot of time listening and then start to put to action a lot of the things that I heard, so can you. So get out there and listen is what I would say.
Well, I'm very glad I asked the final question. What a brilliant answer. Dean, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been, as insightful as I expected. And that last nugget there was just perfect. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.